We're now in open session, and obviously we've had a discussion around amendments that we are seeking to make to the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Bill. We have taken procedural advice on that in a closed session. We have considered the correspondence from the Minister and have received the views of the Bills Office and have discussed those out. And the committee has agreed the following: that we would like to amend the bill to instruct the department to bring forward a scheme to provide leave and pay for miscarriage to come into operation 12 months from the commencement date of this legislation. Actually, it's to be introduced.
To be introduced 12 months
to be introduced
from the commencement of
12
this
months from the commencement of this legislation. The second one is to bring forward an amendment to remove the 26-week qualifying period and make provision for the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Bill to be a day one right for workers and staff, and any other amendments might have to be done around that. And then the final thing that we agreed was that there would be a recommendation in our bill report that more work is undertaken by the department in relation to the leave period. So it currently is that the leave can be taken in blocks of 1 week, and we've had some evidence given to us that that's not flexible enough, so we want the department to look at that some more. So that is what we discussed, and the consensus that was reached in terms of the amendments in closed session. So just to ask members to consent to that in open session.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have department officials, Peter?
Departmental officials are here, Chair. We will obviously write officially to them on those two amendments and indicating that the committee will make a recommendation within the bill report. I suppose it's whether the officials have anything they wish to say, any questions they wish to ask, or whether members have any questions they wish to ask officials.
So if I hand over to yourselves and welcome Colin and Kelly and Lawrence to the meeting, is there anything that maybe you want to outline to us in response to the proposed amendments that the committee is pursuing?
Well, I mean, clearly, the Minister had written to you, Chair, to outline his position, and I mean, we have had some discussions with him subsequently before coming before the committee today. So, I mean, I think the Minister's preferred position would be that he would make a commitment on the floor of the House, as he outlined in his letter, to do some work on miscarriage leave. It is a very different issue in many ways, in that it affects quite a high proportion of parents. Whereas parental bereavement, only 1% of children die before age 18, so that is a very exceptional set of circumstances. But I mean, clearly the committee has decided what it intends, and I mean, we'll need to take the issues back to the Minister. Just on the issue of the day one right. I mean, we have discussed that with the committee previously, and there's some information in the Minister's letter too. We have had some further discussions with the Department for Communities in the last couple of days, which have further reassured us that their discretionary support scheme would be a suitable vehicle that would be open to parents who, who were in a position in their first 26 weeks of a new employment of losing a child. That scheme is intended for extreme, exceptional or crisis circumstances, and DFC have confirmed with us that they would very much see this situation as falling into that category, and that scheme is open to any one on a net income of up to just below £21,000, which equates to about £27,000 in most circumstances, which would be about the median income. So there is that provision there, but Kelly, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, thanks.
Thank you. And just to put on record that the committee is very supportive of the bill itself. We want to see it progressed, and that is why we have sought to amend it commencing in the future, given the information that has previously been shared with the committee. And we've taken on board that information in relation to the issue of the day one right and the discretionary support that was outlined in the Minister's letter. That was considered by the committee, and obviously, as you've outlined, there are other eligibility criteria that apply to the discretionary support scheme, and as well there's the complexity of an application that would have to be completed as well. So the committee was of the view that we would prefer it to be a day one right, and the Bills Office are going to advise us of any other complexity around that particular amendment, which we will consider when they bring that back to us. Keith wants to come in, and then Mike.
Okay, thank you very much so far for your information. I have a couple of questions. Regarding miscarriage, has the department done any work on implementing miscarriage? Have they done any work or any, I know you haven't consulted, but have you done any work at all, whether it be with groups or costings?
Well, we have done some costing work, just, I suppose, since the issue of miscarriage was raised in the second stage debate, but we haven't had any consultation with groups on the issue of miscarriage.
And can you disclose the costings? Have you any approximate idea, Colin, of what costings would be?
Well, we have a range of costings. I mean, the number of miscarriages a year, and I suppose this is one of the issues with miscarriage, that there's a lot that isn't fully understood. There are many miscarriages that happen that are not documented, the pregnancies that have never been confirmed, but there's a range of estimates which go up to around £3 million a year.
Okay. And would you refer to the numbers of miscarriages based on information from where? Were you getting that from, Colin? Is that through medical professions, I presume, or where are you getting those figures from?
Well, estimates about how many miscarriages there are seem to vary quite a lot depending on the country they come from and the source they come from. There's an official Office of National Statistics estimate of 1 in 8, but some of the miscarriage charities say they believe it's about 1 in 4 of all pregnancy.
So you're saying, Colin, just that's an approximate figure to include provision for miscarriage is going to be approximately an additional 3 million?
Yeah.
Okay, per year?
Yes.
Okay, that's just to add the additional miscarriage aspect on, not what we're currently talking about in the bill. This is the additional.
I suppose it would depend on what the provision is that the committee put into the bill, but that estimate was based on extending the entitlement to parental bereavement leave or parental bereavement pay to people who have suffered a miscarriage.
Okay, and what's the figure then, approximately, Colin, for stillborn, etc., up to 18? So what was the cost to implement that in the current bill if you didn't have the miscarriage aspect, which we talked about, is approximately 3 million? So what would that financial aspect be?
That would be about 100 per annum.
100, I missed that, sorry.
100,000.
Okay, so that bill ultimately increases from 100,000 to over 3 million purely on that aspect of including miscarriage. Okay, and we're talking approximately 1 in 4 based on what knowledge we know. Okay, so that's a high figure, and I'm not taking the figure away from the issue, but that's a big difference in the bill from 100,000 to 3 million. Does that concern the department in any way, Colin?
I suppose
the amendment. Sorry.
I suppose our concern would be to make sure that whatever legislation is brought in is going to be effective and is going to work and is to meet the objectives intended. And I suppose a concern I would have is that we've consulted, and indeed the committee consulted on the basis of parental bereavement leave with the qualifications as set out, which was the death of a child under 18 or stillbirth after 24 weeks, which only affects 236 children per annum. So employers and everyone will have responded to the consultation on that basis. Miscarriage is a situation that unfortunately affects a very high proportion of prospective parents and will affect almost every employer, I would imagine, if not every year, then on a relatively frequent basis. And so, it is an issue that will have a much bigger impact in many ways. So there are a lot of issues that need to be properly scoped out before I think legislation that's effective and would work, could be made. And I suppose the Minister is concerned to make sure that any legislation isn't rushed and as a result flawed. But he said he's very sympathetic to the issue being raised. He's asked us to do scoping work on this issue, and he's prepared to make a commitment to that on the floor of the House.
Hey, Colin, has any miscarriage charities, I know you haven't consulted formally, but has any miscarriage charities communicated with the department based on this bill to say this needs to be, added in?
No.
I see. Okay. But obviously, if you consult, you will get that feedback, I presume not, do yeah?
Oh, yeah.
And I apologise, Chair, just one final question. With regard to employers, have you used any evidence from employers in general that they're not treating miscarriage or loss of a child in any circumstances sympathetically? Is there concern with your department that there's an issue out there?
It's quite hard to say. Many employers, probably most employers, have a system of contractual sick pay, where people who are in the situation of having a miscarriage or indeed any health issue receive a period of time where they receive full pay. But there are people who are on statutory sick pay who don't receive that same level of pay. So, I don't think we have access to a specific Northern Ireland estimate, but certainly I've seen a UK estimate that just below 60% of employers have contractual sick pay that's over and above statutory sick pay, and typically that would be full pay for a period of time. So, there are people out there who are not supported as well as they might be in that situation, but we would really need to scope that properly and work out and consult on options and hear views on what the appropriate model of miscarriage leave and pay would be.
And just, Chair, one final question if I may. And Colin, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't. Does it, considering the difference in finance, and I don't want to refer to it's always about the money, it's not, but does this need to go back to the executive based on what was originally agreed, that the bill was going to cost X, but it's now, this 3 million a year is the first time I heard that figure, unless I missed it last week. Does that need to go back to the executive to get agreement or not?
Certainly any bill that has financial implications needs to be approved by the Department of Finance and by the executive. But I think that the more important issue as far as the Minister is concerned is to make sure that the legislation is effective, it meets its objective, that I suppose we don't undermine the intention behind the original bill, which is to recognise the circumstances of people who've lost a child, and that we bring forward further proposals in relation to miscarriage that suit those circumstances and the needs of parents who have suffered a miscarriage.
Thanks, Colin. And I welcome, I suppose, the Minister's commitment to it. And I suppose we see now where the bill develops. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Colin, and all two ladies.
Keith, Mike.
Chair, thank you, Colin. Before I come to what I wanted to ask you, just on your last answer, you said it would have to go to Finance and the Executive. Are you sticking with that position?
Well, all legislation that has financial implications needs to be approved by the Department of Finance, and all legislation needs to be brought to the Executive. This legislation was brought to the Executive on its original basis. But I suppose with the inclusion of miscarriage leave, it would be a very different bill from the one that was introduced.
I think that's a subjective view that I would disagree with, but
Well, we would need to take further advice, I think, to be absolutely clear on that.
You mentioned as part of the letter from the Minister to the committee this commitment that he's offering to make on the floor of the Assembly that his department will include miscarriage in wider work for the next mandate. Surely there is no means that a minister can make a binding commitment or put a binding obligation on his department for the next mandate. Is that not the case?
Well, I mean, the minister would be, all the parties in the Assembly are represented in the committee. The minister would be making a very clear commitment, and we would actually be initiating work on the issue probably before, albeit, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on secondary legislation to introduce parental bereavement leave and pay, and that will have to be the immediate focus after the bill's passage through the Assembly. But certainly we would be envisaging getting started on the work on...
Yeah, I understand that, Colin, but that's an answer to a different question. Yeah. The question is, as a matter of principle, is it not the case that no minister can put a binding obligation on a future mandate?
Well, I mean, the way to, I mean, I think that's probably correct, that there couldn't be a binding commitment, but it would be a very clear commitment.
Okay. And the other issue with the letter is with regard to including miscarriage. The letter says that the committee is trying to shoehorn. Do you accept that that is inaccurate and inappropriate use of language?
It is the addition of a different issue into a bill that has been developed for a particular set of circumstances, but both sets of circumstances are very unfortunate for the people who are in them. All use of language is a matter of opinion, and if that language is considered inappropriate, I'm sure we could consider whether alternative language could be used.
Well, I consider it inaccurate and inappropriate, and I haven't heard any member of the committee disagree with that assessment. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. John?
Hello, Colin and Audrey. Colin, you're in an unfortunate position today, as many of the civil service find themselves, that they have to defend the position of their minister, and that's your role, and that may be in contrary view to the majority of the committee. I don't see today's briefing as my need to convince you of the merits of the committee's amendments. The committee has come to a decision and will inform the department in writing what our amendments are, and the department will come to a view on that, and the minister will express that in the chamber. Now, as the debate develops in the chamber, individual committee members may, as is their right, decide to take a different position after hearing further evidence. But I'm just slightly concerned that we're getting into a position now where I almost feel the need that I have to convince the departmental officials of the merits of a committee amendment. But I won't be getting into that position, I can assure you.
I think we're officials, we understand our role. We're not the ones who need to be convinced.
Right, okay, and just in terms of the legislative process, the bill has now left the executive. The bill is now in the hands of the legislator, and the Assembly will decide the future outworkings of the bill. The Minister could decide at various stages not to move it. Whether the amendments are competent or not is a matter for the Speaker. And the Speaker will decide whether the amendments are competent or not and within the scope of the bill as well. I know it's the experience myself as a Minister. Once you bring legislation to the floor of the Assembly, you lose control of it. The legislator takes it over, and it may take a different path than you had originally intended it, but I think the committee has made its views clear today.
Stephen, can we bring Stephen into the spotlight, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Colin, for your presentation. I appreciate the points that you've made. Just in terms of, and obviously, I suppose you're highlighting how miscarriage is such a sensitive issue, how it's so important to get it right. And I think that's is certainly where the Department and the Minister is coming from in terms of, that it justifies its own focused, bespoke approach to make sure that indeed they get it right. Just in terms of any other lessons from any other jurisdictions, I'd be interested to hear any research the Department has done from the rest of the UK, the Republic of Ireland, and anywhere else in the world. Obviously, New Zealand has been mentioned, India has been mentioned. It would be just interesting to know, as a committee member, just to see any lessons that could be learned to ensure, Northern Ireland gets it right.
Well, I suppose there's not very much experience of there being a specific entitlement to miscarriage leave. New Zealand and India are the only two that we're aware of that have it already in place. There are some private members' bills, I believe, in the process in Westminster on the issue. So there's a certain amount of information about those private members' bills. Kelly, is there anything you'd like to add? You're muted, Kelly.
Not according to my. All right, sorry, not according to my screen. I wasn't muted. Hopefully you can hear me now. No, the only thing in addition to that is just to say that in the Republic of Ireland there is also one private member's bill at the moment, although its progress seems to be stalled just for now, according to reports. And there has been a public commitment literally just made last week in the Republic of Ireland that they are going to look at sort of exploring this issue, consulting, looking at what the appropriate provision might be. So it might be likely that at some stage in the future something might come of that in the Republic of Ireland.
Okay, thank you. And obviously consultation, as you mentioned, there is key to get it right in terms of the complexities, the costs and so on. And hearing directly from the miscarriage charities would obviously form a key part of any consultation. Just one other point that we can make. Is there a body of evidence that employers currently are not handling this with the sensitivity and the sympathy that is required, given it's such a delicate issue?
I suppose we haven't really, because we haven't consulted on this, we wouldn't really have any robust evidence base on that. But I think, as I said before, that there are people who suffer miscarriages who would only be in receipt of statutory sick pay, but most employers, and certainly I think, as I said, also around 60% of employers offer contractual sick pay on full pay, so it would be a minority of people who are in the position of not getting the support, but nonetheless those people are there, we would believe, but we would need to do more work on actually understanding the scale of the problem.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Okay, thank you, folks. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I have no other members looking in. Peter, is there anything additional?
Chair, just the committee will write to the department indicating the amendments that it wishes the department to bring forward, and the department will then respond as to whether or not it is willing to bring those. simultaneously, our Bill Office colleagues will be drafting that, and if necessary, amendments can be made by the committee if the department doesn't wish to make those. I should just again point out that the decision to seek amendments is one thing. Those amendments will come back to the committee, and then the committee will make a decision as to whether it wishes to go forward with those amendments. So this is still a situation where the department has the option to come forward with something better or different. But the committee will write with the specifics of what was discussed and agreed this morning.
Okay, thank you. And appreciate you being here. Okay, members, so we're going to...
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the beginning of our meeting now because we were in closed session. So just go to item number 1, which is our apologies, and we have apologies from Matthew O'Toole and from Peter Weir. I don't think there's anybody else was here.
Everyone else has been here, yeah.
And obviously just to advise members that Matthew has now replaced Sinead McLaughlin as Deputy Chair of the committee. And obviously I'd like to put on record the committee's thanks to Sinead for her work and diligence over the past year. And obviously as a committee we have worked through some trying times throughout the pandemic, and certainly I as Chair have appreciated Sinead's support for the various work that we have done over that time. I'm sure other members do as well. And also just to advise members that this is Tommy's last meeting as well as part of the committee office team. He's taken up a new post outside of the Assembly, and just on behalf of the committee I'd like to thank Tommy for the huge amount of work he has done and the huge support he has been to all of us over the past number of months, and wish him the best for the future. So item number 2 is our draft minutes, and there's a copy of the draft minutes from the meeting held on the 13th of October at page 5 of our packs. Are members content that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting? So item number 3 is Chair's business. We don't have anything on that this week. So we're moving on then to item number 6, which is the small-scale green energy bill, and that's a standing item on our agenda as well. There's a copy of the Hansard of the briefing from the bill sponsor on the 13th of October at page 10 of tabled papers. The call for evidence will be published in the local press this Friday and will close on the 18th of November, and the committee will receive a raised paper on the bill on the 3rd of November and a presentation on the paper at its meeting on the 17th. So all of that is for the committee to note at this stage. Moving on then to item number 7, which is our matters arising. At page 73 there's a copy of a departmental response regarding UK Innovate UK and bids. And the committee asked the department to clarify the Minister's comments in relation to Innovate UK, where he stated that there were unsuccessful bids and the department was supporting those. So during 2021, and as a response to the COVID pandemic, Innovate UK issued a portfolio of rapid response interventions delivering targeted support. These included the Fast Start Grant Competition and the Sustainable Innovation Fund. The Department for Economy secured $2.3 million to extend support to Innovate UK Blue Zone applicants from the North in 2020-21. This was allocated to 41 Blue Zone, see page 74 of our packs, applicants in the Fast Start competition and 2 Blue Zone applicants in the Sustainable Innovation Fund competition. In 2021-22, DFE has continued to fund Blue Zone applicants to Innovate UK competitions. The fund for 21-22 is up to $3 million and includes the potential to fund 9 Smart Grant applications, 10 Creative Industries Fund programme application, 1 Young Innovators and 1 Women in Innovation. So that's for members to note. Moving on then to 7.2, which is 76 of our packs. There's a copy of correspondence from the EU Affairs Manager regarding European Affairs Committee report on FTAs. On the 11th of October, the Lords European Affairs Committee published its report on the free trade agreement between the UK and Iceland, Norway and Liechtenstein. The report points out that the protocol on the North means that the FTA will apply differently here, However, none of the government's explanatory materials, the explanatory memorandum, the parliamentary report or the impact assessment makes any reference to the interaction between the Free Trade Agreement and the Protocol. However, BES and the Department for International Trade state that where UK has FTAs, Northern Ireland businesses will of course benefit from preferential tariffs, just as the rest of the UK will, and Northern Ireland businesses will of course benefit from the tariffs that we have agreed in this deal. Business guidance will be published in the usual way in relation to this. So that's for members to note. 7.3 then at page 18 of table papers, there's a response from the Department to the Committee's request for further information on the EU Exit Frontier Workers and EU Settlement Scheme. The Committee asked whether Border Force or other authorities will have the power to actively search for people in breach of rules around settled status, and whether people still in the process of seeking EU settled status will continue to have access to benefits. The Department states the Border Force have the power under Schedule 2 to the Immigration Act 1971 to examine any individual who has arrived in Britain or the North for the purposes of establishing, amongst other things, whether they require leave to enter, and if so, whether it should be granted, and if they already hold leave to enter, whether it should be cancelled. Where an individual has arrived in Britain from the South, such examination will take place on an intelligence-led basis only to identify individuals who do not hold leave but require it and do not benefit from deemed leave in time, and just to advise members that in time and late applicants to the settlement scheme will retain their right to work and access benefits pending the outcome of their application and any appeal. That again is for members to note, but members might note that the department passed it to the Home Office to respond to, and to me it reads like a typical Home Office response. So 7.
Uncaring? You couldn't possibly comment.
7.4 then, at page 20 of the table papers, a response from the Department in relation to the joint letter from the Committee on the Administration of Justice and a number of legal and cross-border organisations to all executive ministers regarding the EU settlement scheme and the rights of EU citizens and their family members in the North, and evidence that some are facing discrimination. The Department states that the Executive Office has responsibility for this matter, and that the Committee will be copied into their response once it's available. So obviously that will come back to us. 7.5 then at page 24 of table papers, there's a response from the Department on why the business case for all age apprenticeships programme was rejected by the Department and what work is now being done to take it forward. The Department states that all business cases over 5 million must be considered by the Department's Casework Committee to provide feedback and advice on adjustments required prior to the submission to the Minister and the Department of Finance. The Casework Committee did not recommend it to go forward for approval at the time, and asked for additional material to be added, including additional alternative funding options and more detail on how funding risks can be controlled in light of current departmental budget pressures. These recommendations are currently being addressed with a view to a resubmission shortly. Should Ministerial and Department of Finance approval be received, a contract variation process will commence to amend the all-age eligibility criteria for introduction in early 2022. So that will come back to us obviously as well.
Chair, that'll be part of the issues around single-year budgets. So with any luck, the introduction of multi-year budgets would iron out issues like that.
Moving on then to item number 8, which is our correspondence. There is at 8.1, pages 99 to 106, a copy of various correspondence from Lord J, who's chair of the subcommittee on the protocol. The correspondence includes topics such as greenhouse gas emission trading scheme, aid and the internal market, dust accumulations and harmonised standards for toys. So that's for members to note at this point. At page 107, there's a copy of the Department for Economy's fact sheet for September regarding online job posting trends, again for members to note. That page 110 of our packs, there's a copy of a departmental monthly economic update for October, again for members to note. At page 22 of table papers, there's a copy of a response from the Department to the Communities Committee regarding the British Government's current plans for the introduction of a gas and oil boiler ban on new build homes by 2025. The Department states that the goal of transitioning to net zero by 2050 cannot be achieved without phasing out the use of fossil fuels, replacing oil and coal heating systems with low carbon alternatives, as well as decarbonising the gas network by replacing natural gas with biomethane and hydrogen. For new builds, the Department of Finance is proposing a phased approach to uplifting building regulations to ensure that new buildings are net zero ready. The Department of Finance plans to consult on the first phase of the uplifts before the end of 2021, with subsequent consultations expected to address timeframes for requirements around low carbon heating for existing homes, a timescale for the phasing out of the fossil fuel home heating oil has not yet been identified. So that's for members to note. At page 29 of our packs, there is a whistleblowing complaint from the University and Colleges Union. The committee is not a responsible authority when it comes to a whistleblowing complaint. The committee has also been forwarded to, the complaint has also been forwarded to the Department and the Audit Office. So if members are content, we will respond to advise the UCU of the committee's position. And then page 80 of table papers is a copy of the fourth report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and that is for members to note. And then item number 9, any other business, and I know Claire had raised yesterday the issue of the High Street voucher scheme, and we had asked officials to join us to give us some update in relation to that, and Claire might want to speak to this as well. But Peter, if we could just seek some clarification from the department that anybody who has an application submitted before the deadline will have it processed, regardless of whether they have had correspondence back, because I know I've dealt with a number of constituents who have not yet received a confirmation email, and they applied a number of weeks ago, and I think Claire is experiencing a similar issue.
Chair, yeah, we flagged that one up directly to the department. We did ask for officials to come and talk those issues through with the committee today. We weren't able to get officials at the notice we were offering. They are working on a more extensive written response, trying to capture everything they've learned, everything we've passed on to them. Obviously, the department's getting information on any issues and glitches from a range of different sources, so they're I guess compiling a response on how those are being dealt with. As far as we're aware currently, the applications, if there's been no verification email, if you haven't had your application is being processed, then it's not being processed, but they're ensuring that there isn't a glitch in the system, so that things are being processed that haven't triggered that email. But it's as an automatic response, if it's being processed, that email should be triggered, but they're examining the system for any potential flaws around that. So we would hope fairly soon, and as soon as we get the update, we'll send it out to members. We won't wait for a committee meeting. And issues that you're getting, if you can continue to send those, again, it's useful for the department in case it's ones they've not heard of, so that they can do some work around trying to ensure that any glitches can be worked out. What they have said is that the sheer size of this means that perfection is unachievable, but they think the run rate has been really quite good in terms of experience of systems like this in other places, on this sort of scale. But it's inevitable that glitches occur, but they're trying to kind of gather those and work through them as they get them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I suppose on a first point, I find it quite disappointing that as a statutory committee, officials, at least from the department, cannot come, given as well that we have recess period next week. So it's not, this is the point in which we have to be addressing them, because the deadline is next week. I don't think it's enough to say, let's just see how this works out, because the difficulty is that have those emails been submitted and there's some way that people can't prove that that's the case, then they're not going to have access to that. And I get really frustrated when I see 170,000 people haven't applied for this. They have, but their emails have gone to a black hole. The system in this has not been very well developed, to the point that people weren't even aware that they couldn't submit more than 4 applications under one email address. And I know this committee talked about this, but what do the public know in relation to that? So I suppose I'm really frustrated about the approach in relation to this, and pulling together a written document will not help my constituents who don't have access to this. I'm also super conscious that whilst this is a high street voucher scheme, people will have no choice other than to pay for food and heating with this. So are they losing that opportunity because the department can't get its act together? I do think that their lack of response has been unacceptable, and I would really hate to think that a tweet I put out yesterday has now encouraged them to do what they should have been doing already. I also don't accept that they couldn't have developed this better. We have had over a year to develop this. This should have been released last year, from what I recall, or even at the beginning of this year. So I am really disappointed by this, Peter, and it's nothing in terms of what this committee hasn't done. Yeah. I think the department needs, even in an informal session, because I am submitting those emails, I am raising questions with them, and quite frankly, we're not getting responses even as MLAs, and I don't think that's good enough. So. There does seem to be glitches, and I would love to, not to necessarily have them in front of us as a mechanism for holding them to account, which is our job, let me remind the department, but also actually to tell them the issues so that they can pick them up straight away. An email is such a slow process to do that. And let's also be reminded of all those people who are not technically minded. To talk about glitches, to talk about junk folders, all of that is not good enough for those people who don't even have ability to understand what that means. So I suppose, I'm not happy about this, and it's disappointing that they didn't see fit to come to this committee, even as a matter of course, given that the deadline is next week, and certainly not to come to this committee when it was requested. And I do think more has to be done. My advice, and I know it's not necessarily possible to do this, is to extend the deadline so that it can deal with this. And I think that's maybe something we as a committee might want to suggest to them.
So I think we first of all need just to clarify that issue about people who haven't received the confirmation emails. Because of the deadline, which is imminent, are we to advise those people to reapply, or if there was to retain evidence that they have applied?
Chair, can I ask if members have had feedback on the phone line at all?
Yeah,
if people are able to...
not getting answer. And the difficulty is that there's a couple of processes to this. So you go onto the website, you submit your email, and then what's expected is that you will receive an email which will then link you to the process. Yeah. People haven't received that. We talked about this previously, where there was some issues with specific email addresses, but people are still relying on the department to give them guidance in relation to that. And the other difficulty is that with two, where there are multiple applications with email addresses, you're getting a verification email which doesn't tell you what applications it's verifying. Yeah. So I have a situation where a mother has applied for her 2 parents, her partner and herself, has got 3 verification emails, but hasn't got a 4th. So they don't know which application they're trying to apply for. Then I'm finding myself in a situation having to write to the department and say, could you tell me these are in the system? And they're coming back, in fairness, and they only started coming back yesterday after my tweet, where they say, yes, we can verify. That's putting a burden on the department and the officials in itself, to the end that the whole scheme is going to be undermined. So there's so many glitches in relation to this. I would nearly sit down with them half a day in the next couple of days and try and put these across, but I suspect they know, but...
Chair, we'll go back. As I say, I'm dealing with the department on a daily basis around these, and everything you've said has been broadcast to the department and is on record, and we will continue to push for direct access to officials so that these issues can be bottomed out. Chair, the other thing I suppose is to the issue of timescale. If members were agreeable, I know the card itself, when you get it, it goes as far as March 2022. And we did discuss this before, where mitigations on this scheme around it being not interfering with benefits and so on might not be replicated for a further scheme. But if you just open the end of this scheme, would that actually still be the same? So people's applications could be dealt with until essentially the whole thing closes down in March. If members are content, it might be worth writing to the department to ask for clarification on whether that is, considering the issues there have been, if that's a possible and sensible solution, just to remove that. It's got to be done by the end of November. The issue, the reason for putting that in place in the first place was to encourage people to spend in a time scale. That's obviously happening. People did that, and there's the biggest glut, or the biggest number of people will spend within that time scale. But for those that the system is failing, if you maintain the thing being open.
Mike and then Keith.
So at the moment it closes the end of November, but it could run to the end of March.
The cards are alive, if you like, till then.
And the legislation is in place.
The only thing I would say, Peter, is I've got the clear impression that the department don't want to run the holidays at home scheme
At the same time.
consecutively.
That's right.
So you would be knocking back another scheme, just something to consider.
That money has to be spent within the financial year, and for both schemes.
For both, yeah.
Both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
So perhaps we could also ask for an update in relation to the holiday at home scheme, because I know we previously
we
had
were due to have a
briefing.
and that was cancelled.
if I may add, I'm hearing that they're putting fairly severe qualifications on the holiday at home scheme. Like you've got to prove you're only taking the holiday because of the scheme.
You do that.
How do you do that? So that it's all additionality. So I think it would be welcome to get some sort of briefing.
Yes.
Chair, if members are going to, we'll seek clarification on that. The scheme has not been very clear to us. I know the sector has had some issues, so it might just be worth actually also finding out from the sector
Yes.
where they think things stand.
Yeah, not just the officials.
Yes.
Yeah, if members are content, we write
Yes,
to NITA
Yeah.
on that. Joanne Stewart, just to clarify what the sector is.
Yeah. And ask the
Understand
department
that.
for a written update
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Chair, we'll go ahead and do that.
Keith.
Just on the point about running the scheme on past the 30th of November, you're into the whole Christmas thing, and business didn't want that £100 to effectively affect people's Christmas spend. Not disagreeing with any of Claire's points, but you don't want that to mask spend, and then business won't get the benefit of that.
It's on a separate issue, so if you want to conclude
Oh,
on
yeah.
this.
Okay. So members are. Sorry,
Just
Keith.
one final point. I heard a local disc jockey this morning on the radio, and he wasn't quite helpful to the scheme, to be honest. He didn't certainly do any benefit to the scheme or what the department or anybody's trying to do. So I think it's a wee bit disappointing that there's no other material that he can use apart from running the scheme down, which is trying the high street. And people, in fairness, can spend it how they wish, but I think he needs to look at his programming.
Claire.
Sorry, just one quick point. It's not my intent to want to push the scheme back, because I do recognise the purpose of it and why those dates were considered, but it's really to address the fact that some people are not going to have access to it, and I would imagine businesses would rather they had the £100 to spend it rather than spending it even later than the November deadline. The other ask I would maybe say is there any? I don't think the department's going to come back with any solutions to this, between now and the deadline. So at the very, very least, could they provide an information leaflet, even recognising the flow chart of this, that, okay, this is the process that you have to follow, submit your email address, this is what should happen, if it doesn't, then do this. And then the verification process, it could take 3 to 4 weeks. If it doesn't, then you should need to do this, because I think the difficulty is that people just want some sort of reassurance that their application is in the system. And they're not getting that, but by the current system, and it's not just the verification process. It's that kind of, I've submitted my email. What do I do now? Just any more information so that they can help it. I think it's frustrating. 170,000 people haven't applied. No, sorry, Minister, they have. Your system just hasn't accepted them. So I think they need to be more clear about the application process rather than telling people they're not doing something that the people actually, in fairness, are.
Okay, we'll follow up on all that, Peter.
Yeah.
John.
With the cancellation of the 14 to 19 strategy briefing, have you any indication from the department, is there going to be a briefing in the near future, or is this scheme dead in the water?
No, Chair. The cancellation was due to nothing further to update on. No further work having been done. My understanding is we will have a briefing in the near future once the two departments have more to tell the committee. Subsequent to the last briefing, we had made a briefing in, I want to say March.
Which was also supposed to be a concurrent briefing.
It was, and education, I think, was was busy at the time. So we've had updates and they haven't. There may have been some difference between the two departments as well around briefing. So yes, we are scheduling that again, and our understanding is it is still a priority and still moving.
Well, time will tell.
Okay. Thank you, members. So the next thing then is the date, time and place of the next meeting, and obviously next week is recess, so the next meeting is Wednesday the 3rd of November at room 30 at 10 a.m. So and just to remind members, there is an informal meeting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. via Teams with the Children's Law Centre on the High Street voucher scheme. So
Thank you, Chair.
thank you.
Thank you, members.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound?